Have you ever stopped to think about how you teach a global language like English in a country that's home to literally thousands of them? Well, today, we're diving deep into that very challenge, unpacking what it really means to teach English inside the incredibly rich, multilingual classrooms of India. Let's get into it. To really get a handle on this, just try to imagine this for a second. A child in India might be speaking one language at home with their family, a totally different one with their friends out in the playground, and then, get this, they go to school and learn in a completely different language. It's this daily linguistic juggling act. It's truly remarkable, but you can see how complex it is for teachers. And that right there, that's the absolute heart of the matter. We're not teaching English to a blank slate. Not at all. We are adding it to a brain that is already wired with multiple complex language systems. And that one simple fact, it changes absolutely everything. So here's our game plan. We're going to start by exploring the multilingual brain itself. Then we'll get into a really key concept called language interference. After that, we'll look at some real-world examples, with sounds, words, and grammar. Then we'll uncover a really powerful teaching method to deal with it all. And finally, we'll zoom out to the big, beautiful idea that ties this whole thing together. Okay, first things first, we have to understand the main phenomenon at play here, which is something called language interference. So what is it, really? And why does it matter so much? So language interference is basically when a person's native language leaves its mark on a new one they're learning. You can almost think of it like a linguistic fingerprint. It's not a mistake. It's actually a supernatural and, believe it or not, predictable part of the learning process. And this is where it gets really fascinating, right? It gets super specific. A student who speaks Tamil at home might struggle with certain English vowels in a very particular way, while a Bengali speaker might bring a different rhythm to their English. A child's first language basically acts as a predictable map for the so-called mistakes they're likely to make. And this leads us to 3 truths that are absolutely crucial for every teacher to understand. 1. Interference is normal. 2. It's predictable. And 3. It's correctable. The goal isn't to punish these errors, but to see them for what they are, clues, and then guide the student with real understanding. Okay, now for the fun part. Let's put on our detective hats for a little bit. We're going to examine the linguistic evidence, the specific clues that language interference leaves behind in everyday speech. So clue number 1, you might hear a student say pish instead of fish, or pan instead of fan. Now, to someone who doesn't know what to look for, this might just sound random. But nope, there is a very clear and predictable pattern happening here. So what's going on? Why this specific sound swap? Well, the answer is hiding in plain sight, right inside the child's native language. See, that F sound, the one you make by touching your top teeth to your bottom lip, that sound just doesn't exist in a lot of South Indian languages. So the brain, looking for the closest possible match, just defaults to the sound it knows. P. Simple as that. All right, let's look at another piece of evidence. This time, it's grammar. A student might say, he go to school. Now, this isn't a mistake because they're being careless. It is, once again, a very predictable pattern. So what's the logic here? There's gotta be a reason, right? What rule from their first language is shaping how they speak English? And you guessed it. The answer is in the grammar of their home language. In a lot of Indian languages, you don't really change the verb based on the subject. That little S on the end of goes, that's a very English-specific thing. The child is just applying the rules they already know to a new language. It makes perfect sense when you think about it. And finally, let's talk vocabulary. You'll hear words like prepone all the time in Indian English. Now, the goal isn't to say these words are wrong, but to also teach the global English alternatives so that communication can be clearer with a wider audience. Okay, so we've identified the patterns. We know their causes. Now for the really big question. How should a teacher actually respond? Well, this brings us to a really powerful and empathetic approach. Correction without shame. The method is actually pretty simple, but it's so profound. First, you focus on the error, not the child. It's about the language, not their intelligence. Instead of scolding, the teacher just gently rephrases the sentence. They model the correct way to say it, and, this is huge, they praise the student's attempt to communicate. And they keep the whole thing really brief and quick. This way, you don't disrupt the flow, and you don't turn a learning opportunity into a moment of shame. Here's exactly what that looks like. The child says, he go to school. The teacher first validates what they said with a simple yes, and then gently models the correct form. He goes to school. It's such a small interaction, but the impact is massive. It's respectful, it's effective, and it's totally empowering for the student.
Now, let's zoom all the way out, because all of these small details, all these techniques, they're all pointing to a much larger, much more profound philosophy. What is the real goal here?
Just look at this number for a second. 19,500. That's how many languages and dialects are spoken in India. Just let that sink in. It's not just a country, it's a living library of human expression. And that brings us to what might be the most important point of all. Teaching English is not about replacing a child's native language. It's about adding another tool to their already impressive linguistic toolbox. It is all about coexistence, not erasure. And that, right there, is the ultimate takeaway. The goal is not to get rid of a child's accent or erase their identity. Of course not. It's to empower them to use English clearly and confidently, adding a global language to their already rich, beautiful linguistic world. So, we'll leave you with this thought. Once you start seeing these patterns of language interference, you really can't unsee them. It completely changes how you listen, not just to language learners, but to everyone. So how might this new lens change the way you see communication in your own life?